You're listening to ayahuascapodcast.com.
There's a lot of stuff inside of us that we can't own. And when it pops up, we think it's something else. A lot of folks are in agreement that they call it the shadow or what have you, right? So we've got stuff inside of us. We've got hate and rage and guilt and shame and yada, 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 yada. Man's inhumanity to man. And then, we have a vision of it. The subconscious is like, hey, we want to deal with this. Look at this, right? Can we deal with this, please? It communicates it the best way it knows how because it doesn't necessarily speak English. It speaks in this 5-dimensional vision. People have a tendency to go into fight or flight around it, right? They push it away. They don't want to believe it. They other it. They think it's something else. They want to fight against it, all this kind of stuff. They think it's other. And that's tricky because then we go into fight or flight. If it's us, the wise thing to do would be to kind of try to open a dialogue with it and see what kind of love it wanted. Does it need love? Does it need support? What do we do? How can I help? As Ram Dass would say.
Hi guys, and welcome to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, with the host Sam Believ. Today I'm having a conversation with Daniel Shankin. Daniel is a mindfulness coach and psychedelic integration specialist, founder of TAM Integration, which offers support, education, and integration circles for those working with psychedelics. He also leads the Mountain TAM Psychedelic Integration Coaching Program, training emerging facilitators. In this episode, we talk about psychedelics and counterculture, the importance of processing psychedelic experiences, complexity of making real-life changes, enlightenment, psychedelics and relationships, handling difficult psychedelic experiences, shadow work, ego and default network, and more. Enjoy this episode. This episode is sponsored by La Huayra Ayahuasca Retreat. At La Huayra, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. La Huayra, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Sam. It's great to be here.
Daniel, tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to work with psychedelics and psychedelic integration.
I've started doing psychedelics at kind of a young age. I was in high school. Early high school when I first started doing psychedelics. And at the same time, I was sort of also interested in meditation, things of that nature. I had my parents' record collection, and I know that the Beatles, hung out in India and did LSD and they made awesome music. And that seemed like a good combination. And so these things have always been interesting to me. And I've been following that path in a variety of ways for, years and years now. And this is where it's led me. This is where it's led me today.
So you mentioned early high school. What kind of psychedelics are we talking about? And what year would it be?
I was probably 13. Seems young now, but it seemed, I started smoking pot, when I was 13. And I think I ended up at a party the end of my freshman year. And there was some, with the big kids. And, there was some guy who was even older than the seniors, I think. And he had some L. And I ended up on some L. And it was a wild, curious evening. And so that's kind of about where that started. And, this was kind of the usual things that were available to kids in those days. So, cannabis and LSD and mushrooms. It was basically what was on the menu.
So which of these experiences made you realize about the importance of the integration? Maybe was it a personal experience where you realized that it's necessary?
Integration wasn't even a word until much later. Nobody spoke about it. This was the 90s. There wasn't the internet, Erowid. We didn't know about, any of the books in the library weren't going to give you straight information. You kind of had to learn through, books on counterculture. Is what I found. If you were interested, you had to read about, the hippies, and you had to read about the meditators and things like that. You had, hopefully you could find some Ram Dass or something, and he would talk about it. But integration, yeah, I didn't hear about until much later that, people were doing there was like maybe 2 groups doing integration circles, right? Erie was throwing an integration circle, and Cherie down in LA was doing an integration circle, and they just seemed great. That seemed like a really good thing to be doing. And yeah, I felt like I needed it, and so I needed it. So I started doing them so that I could, have a circle to be with people. And that's kind of how it started. That's how it's kind of started for me.
So how does one go about that and sort of learn integration? What would you say if somebody who's listening has never heard that word before, but they had psychedelic experiences and now they want to integrate? What should they do?
Right. So you had an experience, right? Good job. You had an experience and you survived, right? I'm talking to somebody new. You had an experience and you're okay. But you might have had experiences of vision for yourself, right? You might have, there was probably some good stuff that happened and there was probably some intense stuff. Maybe it was bad, it was confusing. And so there's a mix of these things where maybe you saw the face of God, right? And he reached down and touched your heart and it exploded into rainbow love. And you're like, hey, I want my life to be like that always. And then also you might have seen terrifying visions of hell, or had, excruciating memories of times past, or you might have been confronted with your lower nature and realized that you haven't been being the best version of yourself possible. And you're struggling with that, right? So experiences can be mixed. That's okay. And so with that in mind, you have 2 choices. You can just stuff it all away and be like, that was weird, and kind of forget it was happening and go back to your normal life. Or you can say to yourself, hey, I want to take some of that. So I want to learn from this and I want to grow from this. And maybe I do want my heart to be more filled with rainbows on a regular basis. And maybe I do want to be a better version of myself. And maybe I want to learn to forgive, and I want myself and others. And maybe I want to clean up my act in certain ways. And so integration is a process that is basically the process of making that happen. And so it's highly individualized, right? I mean, generally people do a lot of the same stuff. They'll journal, or they'll create personal ritual, or they'll make commitments to themselves to live a different way. They'll probably want to do some meditation and some yoga. A lot of people want to clean up their diet, and that's how it goes, right? But what your curriculum and your lessons are highly individual, right? It might, for some people, it might be quitting their job. For some people, it might mean getting a different job that's more in line with your values. It might mean going to church. It might mean leaving the church. It might mean doing yoga. It might mean cleaning up your credit, right? And paying back the people that you owe. But you know what it is. It's just, you got to take responsibility to actually do it. And it's helpful to recognize that it's a moment to moment practice. Sometimes people think like, oh, I should already be enlightened. And there's people out there who will pretend to be enlightened. They're like, oh, I got enlightened. And then they just act as if they're enlightened all of a sudden. And they're obviously not. For everybody around them can tell that they're not. And, but so you don't focus on the goal, or necessarily some sort of lofty goal. You think about, how am I going to be more kind and honest every time a challenging moment arises? Right. And maybe I did it good. Maybe I did it not so good. And take responsibility for it without criticizing yourself too harshly. And then just getting up and trying again. How's that? Does that work? Seem like a good starting point?
Yeah, it's the integration is one of those topics that many people say, but not many understand, and it's kind of can be explained in so many different ways. So I don't think there is a right or wrong, but it's a good start, and I definitely struggle with explaining it to people that come to our retreat. I mean, I do my best. We even do a workshop on the topic, but knowing my own experience with medicine specifically, I work mostly with ayahuasca. I just understand how hard it actually is to do. So it's one of those things that are easier said than done. But you mentioned enlightenment, so quick question for you: have you met anyone who is actually enlightened?
I've met people who are close. I mean, depending on our definition. What's our definition of enlightenment? Okay, you want me to answer? From a Buddhist perspective, I sort of think that it refers to somebody who is free from ignorance and addiction and craving and hatred, right? So it's somebody who is just clear in their seeing, right? Because a lot of the times our seeing and our understanding gets clouded by like what I want, what I need to have, how am I make sure I have the stuff I need? And then it's also clouded by, I hate that, I don't like that, that feels threatening to me. And then of course there's just confusion about the nature of the world and the self in general, right? So in yoga, they talk about, enlightenment is sort of knowledge of the true self, right? So when we stop mistaking what's false for what's true, what's permanent from what's temporary, what's real from illusory, then we're getting close. And a lot of that is in reference to what we think we are and who we think we are, because we have a lot of erroneous ideas about who and what we are, I think, and that we're very attached to being perceived a certain way by ourselves and others. We're very attached to not being seen in other ways, and it creates a lot of chaos for ourselves and the people that we love. I think the state of enlightenment is really simple and natural. I think sometimes those of us who have got glimpses of visionary states full of magic and wonder and subtlety and other dimensions and stuff think that enlightenment is like a magic state of some kind. And I think that it's just a real simple, peaceful mind full of understanding, and they're having a lack of confusion.
Sounds beautiful. Sounds like something I would want to experience sometime in my life. You never claimed you're enlightened, but you definitely look and talk the part to me. So I remember when I was preparing for this podcast, I listened to some episode with you, and definitely your voice is very soothing. So I have to thank you for this, because I had a very stressful day to coming up to this, and like lots of stuff moving, and I can feel myself almost relaxing and integrating. So I'm sure that the listeners will, yeah, thank you for that. So, but back on the topic of integration.
That's just, man, I got to tell you, that's just teaching yoga for like 15 years. Like that's just, you just learn to talk in a way that relaxes people. You can still be a crazy schmuck and be able to like speak in a relaxing voice. But thank you. I'm glad it's helping.
Yeah, well, you definitely talk the talk. So that's for sure.
And you can ask my wife if she thinks I walk the walk.
Yeah, wives, they will always know it. It's interesting. I want to talk to you about that afterwards, about wives and relationships. What?
Are you married?
Yeah, I'm married and I have 3 kids. They're all very young. So at the same time as having 3 kids and building this ayahuasca retreat, that's very, very busy. It's pretty difficult, and I think that, I mean, I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not like the most spiritual person you've ever met, but I definitely have my, sort of egoistic attachments to certain kind of outcomes. So I definitely would like to come to the point where I'm more peaceful, or maybe like perceive the world in a different way. And I definitely progressed a lot in my own emotional healing journey, but I think that women are placed in this planet to, no matter how good, like my wife is an amazing woman. She's a great wife, but I think they're this like permanent destabilizer that, so here's my theory. I think that life is a game for the souls play because they want to learn something, but the premise of the game or the background sort of setting is you can never win, because when you win in the game you switch off the computer, so you no longer want to play. And the way it's kept from ever winning is by having always some kind of complexities. And I think women is one of those that will never ever go away. So I mean, of course you can become a monk and never deal with women again, but I think that that's also very unpleasant. So what do you think about that? Have you noticed that, men and women were from different planets, and how does that intertwine with your own like growth journey?
I mean, I'm pretty sure that if I lived with anybody and was like up in their business all the time and had my finances tied together with them and had my fates tied up with them, that there would be challenges. Regardless of, regardless of gender or anything like that. I know that my wife and I do challenge each other. I'm lucky she lives by spiritual principles as well. So, we have kind of guidelines for how we want to be and how we want to live. And those are fairly closely aligned, and that's really great. We're not monks, right? We're householders. We're allowed to be in the world. We're allowed to want stuff. We're allowed to, like cool clothes and tasty food and sex and all those kinds of things. And, we're allowed to want to, provide good lives for our children. I think that's dharmic. That's a good thing to do, and to participate in society and support monastics. We donated, Tam donated a little bit of money to a monastery in Nepal this week. That feels good. It's like that's part of the householder gig, is to kind of support charitable projects, I think. To have reciprocity as well is a big thing in our community these days. We practice sacred reciprocity with a variety of organizations. And one of the things that does, and working with people in general, right? We're working with, wife and children, hopefully inspires us to have a generous heart, right? We're talking about, it's like it's like a relationship, I think, works when everybody is, they're enjoying what they're getting, but they're also enjoying what they're giving, right? So kind of working to, support the people in our care, right? In our ever widening, it's like we're kind of universal. Psychedelic people can think really big. We can get really universal into like a one world family, the whole cosmic crew and all that kind of stuff, the interdimensional family. But then, there are also more intimate circles of care, right? And it, that is hopefully what I am inspired to do by my wife, and that includes, being generous of spirit with the things that might irritate me, because I know that she's generous of spirit with the things that I do that irritate her. And one of the things that I like about psychedelics is that it seems to open those channels of love and generosity. That, it's like, people are like, oh, what's your intention for this psychedelic journey? It's like, it's to open the channels of light so that the love of the Lord can shine through me and spill out onto all the people I care about. It's like, what do you want to do? Right? I just want to channel the love through. And I think that a family is a really good way to make that real, to kind of really bring that to the forefront.
You mentioned psychedelics and the sort of couple couples format. So that's something that's not commonly talked about. But like, what do you think should be the integration process maybe for a couple that did psychedelics together, or maybe talk about some of your personal experiences?
I am not going to talk about personal experiences that involve other people. But I think in general, but generally speaking and vaguely speaking, it's really nice, again, to have like a shared language with somebody. When you have a shared experience, you sometimes have a shared language, and you can decide, what are the shared values. And perhaps that even means you have an accountability buddy, right? So it's great to have an accountability buddy and to be like, these are the things that I want to live up to, and I'm willing to have you hold me to that. What are we doing? What tinctures you got?
CBD.
Oh, okay. This is Synergy by Fruiting Bodies. They're also out of Massachusetts, and it's just multi-mushroom blend. It's like reishis and cordyceps.
I was interviewing a guy, and he mentioned how great the CBD is, so I bought some.
Good. I'm glad we're doing it.
Cheers.
A little tincture action.
Cheers.
Cheers.
You mentioned that you and your wife, or your wife, lives by spiritual principles. Can you talk to us? What is this, and how does it look like?
Oh, I don't know. I don't want to get too in the weeds with that, but it's the things that I've been talking about already. It's like we want to be good, wholesome people, right? We want to be honest and generous and patient and, kind. We want to raise our children with good moral values and stuff like that.
Cool. That sounds good. I guess I live by them as well. I didn't know how to call it. Okay, let's go back to the topic of integration. That's your expertise, I believe. And what would you how would you approach someone who had a psychedelic experience and they had a difficult one, like a very deep one, slightly destabilizing one? How would you work with a person like this?
Well, I mean, that's really big. Have you had one? Do you want to talk about one?
We had a few. We had one actually recently, and I think we did a great job. He was. I'll try to describe it without sort of scaring people that are listening, but it was a lifelong repression of a traumatic memory, and when it started to come up, the person sort of seized and kind of tried to like prevent it from happening, and got kind of a little stuck. That's how it felt, like a little stuck in that state of like very body centered, like fear, emotion, stuff like that. So we had we still have a pretty great team. So we did what our approach was: a lot of support, a lot of talking, and just calming and very like grounding presence. And then we did some somatic experiencing style exercises to release those things. And then I also have two integration coaches with whom I work remotely. Both of them did some work as well, of which I'm not sure exactly what they did. But this person is back now. They actually came to visit, and he's doing great. So that definitely worked. But once again, I'm not an integration coach, so like that for me, it's the reason I'm asking is because I'm still learning. And what is the proper? Is there like a proper sequence?
Well, people are different. I can't coach. They actually call this coaching the ghost, right? There's a concept in coaching called coaching the ghost, when people show up and they're like, my partner did this, and they want me to fix them. They're like, my partner did this. What do we do about them? They want me to fix the person who's not there. And I can't really do that. I am always curious, to what extent the repressed memory is actually a memory, if this makes sense, because sometimes the subconscious communicates in symbols and visions that aren't exactly what happened, right? So I'm pretty convinced, like, my dad never, like, chased me through the streets with a knife, right? I swear on a Bible that my dad, like, never chased me down the streets with a knife. So much so that if I had a vision on psychedelics that my dad was chasing me down the streets with a knife, I would probably want to ask myself, what does that represent? Right? It's like, why am I being shown this? And so I always think that that's curious. I mean, sometimes people are like, yeah, this definitely happened. And, that wants to be supported and cared for, but also, why now? Like, why? Yes, you had an experience, but like, why is this coming up? What do you want to do with it? What does this mean? And these kinds of things. So I'm really into inquiry and fact finding, right? It's like, what do you just like, what do you do is like, you just give the person, and this goes for anything. This goes for good experiences, bad experiences. The experiences are strange, and giving people a safe place and like an open forum to discuss what happened and asking them questions that they know the answer to, but they know the answer to like liminally, right? They got to look for it. Like the answer is in a place where they don't ordinarily look. So can you ask folks a question that will get them to think more creatively about themselves and their lives is basically the approach I take with all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, if it starts to become clear that somebody is suffering from like CPTSD or like something that needs clinical care, I generally refer people, I'll still meet with folks, but they should also be seeing a clinician who is trained in CPTSD, sexual assault, trauma, things like that, right? I'm an integration coach. I'm a coach, right? As Bob Jesse and the John Hopkins team says, there's a population of people called healthy normals, right? And there's practices, there's, ways to do psychedelics and what they call the betterment of well people. And so that's my population, right? I work with healthy normals who are looking for the betterment of well people, as opposed to people who need clinical care, right? And therapeutic intervention. If that makes sense. So if somebody has an experience where like that becomes clear that they need that, I want them to go and get it. All right. And I won't abandon them. We can still have some talks if it's useful to them, but they should get the clinical care that they need. Right. That's the ethical thing to do, in my opinion. That's a lot. I kind of threw a lot at you there.
No, but that's all good stuff. Clinical care is definitely important, very valuable. I think both of the integration coaches that I mentioned, one is a counselor and the other one is a therapist. So they kind of know those things as well. But you mentioned PTSD, which is a complex PTSD, right? So, and what's the difference, PTSD and CPTSD?
Well, I mean, you'd probably be better suited to like ask a clinician, right? These definitions, but complex. What is PTSD? Is post-traumatic stress disorder, right? So we all have stress. We all undergo stress. As you were telling me, you had a stressful day today. Did that stress, like, are you processing that stress in a way that is that stress manageable to your system, that you can process it and digest it and deal with it? And, maybe you need a beer at the end of the day and get some extra sleep or something, right? And cool, I dealt with my stress. You meditate, right? You deal with your stress. But then sometimes like the system can't process it because what do they say? It's too much too fast. For your particular system, or it's too little for too long, right? So like cases of neglect with children, right? Too much too fast, or too little for too long. That kind of breaks down the system a little bit. And then we call it trauma, right? So this is traumatic stress that is disordered, right? So it's like my system becomes disordered. I can't manage my thoughts, right? The thoughts of the stress and the trauma is like intrusive. I can't make decisions right. I react in ways that are embarrassing because, in ways that are not appropriate because of the kind of what the stress has done to my nervous system and my mind. And then we have, right, a stress disorder, right? Post, right? Because because it happened before, I guess. So it happened before, right? And then what changes that into like a complex post-traumatic stress disorder? I'm fuzzy on those lines. We should get you a trauma therapist in here to talk about that. It's the edge of my knowledge, I think, on those definitions.
Maybe you can recommend me someone to interview, but let's assume because it's complex, it's a little more complex than just normal PTSD.
So I have a coaching training program, psychedelic integration coaching training program. And we work with a therapist out of Sacramento named Robin Kurland. And she actually she teaches our students about how to deal with repressed memories and, remembering abuse and things like that. She's brilliant and she works with trauma and she's rad.
Does she like to go on podcast?
She could probably fit it in.
Has she tried ayahuasca?
Probably.
Okay.
I don't know. This might come as a shock. I don't always, I don't give everybody I meet a checklist. Since I'm not like an ayahuasquero, like I'm not really like an ayahuasca guy, I don't necessarily talk about, like I'm not bringing up, hey, I was in Peru when this happened kind of thing.
Yeah. No, and neither that you have to. It's just something that is always a bonus because this is in the end of the day an ayahuasca podcast, so we try to somehow tie things back to ayahuasca. So let's do it right now. So what do you think about PTSD and the potential of psychedelics to work with PTSD, anxiety, and depression? Would it help? Obviously, not a medical advice, just your educated guess.
I mean, anecdotally, it seems to in a lot of cases, doesn't it? I mean, there's there's articles out there, there's research papers that would suggest that it does, right?
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, no, I believe in it. I don't need convincing. I just want your opinion and then maybe what to do, because somebody comes to, let's say, an ayahuasca retreat with PTSD and they have a difficult but great experience. They come back, PTSD is somewhat better. And I've had many stories like this. How do they integrate, or what should they do? What would you recommend? Or how to do it properly? Maybe even before they come, what should they?
Right. Well, I mean, I would recommend, so assuming this person has CPTSD, we're going to assume that they have a great therapist, right? So they've got therapeutic support. Hopefully they also have a community of care, right? That they are not going to come back to the same, like an unhealthy environment that's not safe for them, right? Because that could be even more destabilizing because sometimes people are raw and vulnerable. So, like time, space, community, right? Do they have time to integrate? Are they coming right back to like an 80-hour work week, right? Because it's probably not going to land well, right? Are they coming back to like a hostile family who are mad that they left for a week? That's not going to be good to come back to. Are they going to have the space they need to take care of themselves, work out what they need to work out? So, you want to think of like the matrix of their experience, right? That to make sure that it is supportive, right? And I think that is clutch, along with hopefully, again, a competent therapist, perhaps a community group, maybe a men's group, a women's group, depending, maybe they have a spiritual community they could start to tap into. So these sorts of supports, I think, are huge, right? And then there's plenty of integration circles, and there's plenty of literature about integration. People can pick again, the projects that one does to support their integration is going to vary by person to person, right? I knew somebody who had a bunch of journeys and they were like, I need to cook for people. They started having dinners at their home and they had a friend who played such and such a music and they built a community around food, right? Because that's what came up for them, right? And, people, recommit themselves to the arts. All kinds of stuff could happen, but again, these people were resourced enough to be able to make that happen. And, you don't necessarily want your experience to just kind of like, you want it to fall on like fertile ground, right? Where it can take root and blossom. You don't want it to just like fall on rock. You don't want you don't want the seeds of your experience to fall in the desert. And so setting up an environment where you can flourish is big.
Yeah, it's very important because you can't really heal the trauma while it's being formed, And normally, that's why they call it post-traumatic stress disorder. It needs to be over, because if ayahuasca does or psychedelic do open you up and then you come back and it gets even worse. And you mentioned that sort of hostile family. Well, maybe some people need to give themselves permission to never come back if it's really that bad, but not an advice. Once again, it's always more complex than that. But something you mentioned about like the hypothetical vision of your dad chasing you with a knife on the street, which is the subconscious representation of something. What do you believe? Sometimes people's subconscious representation makes them feel that they're possessed or there's some demonic thing or something dark, but it's just their subconscious, kind of masking negative occurrences that way. What do you think about that? And also, like, where you stand on the sort of spiritual side of things? Like, when is it like real demon, or when is it just your crazy thought?
I mean, that's the question of the ages. I have people that I check in with about that. I don't have that sight. There are people who are gifted with that sight, but it's my sense that there's a lot of stuff inside of us that we can't own, and when it pops up, we think it's something else, right? So that's a lot of folks are in agreement that, like, they call it the shadow or what have you, right? So we've got stuff inside of us. We've got like hate and rage and guilt and shame and yada 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 yada. Man's inhumanity to man. And then, we have a vision of it. The subconscious is like, hey, we want to deal with this. Look at this, right? Can we deal with this, please? And it communicates it the best way it knows how, because it doesn't necessarily speak English. It speaks in this, 5-dimensional vision. And then we have a tendency to, this is actually a lot of the work that I do in preparation with people. People have a tendency to go into fight or flight around it, right? They push it away. They don't want to believe it. They other it. They think it's something else. They want to fight against it, all this kind of stuff. They think it's other. And that's tricky, because then we go into fight or flight. If it's us, the wise thing to do would be to kind of like try to open a dialogue with it and see what kind of love it wanted. Does it need love? Does it need support? What do we do? How can I help? As Ram Dass would say. So that's a good place to start. But there's other stuff out there, man. We know there's other stuff out there too. But it's not, in my sense, in my worldview, you don't treat them that much different, right? I mean, it is hard, it's like, that's one of the reasons that we kind of like want to like build up the light body, as it were, right? I was talking about opening those channels to like channel the light through from the divine, right? It's like pour the light of the goddess into my system so it can flow through, is so that like dark entities don't stick, or that we have the wherewithal that if they show up, we can give them love. We can bless them, right? And we can perhaps help them on their way, instead of being some sort of like victim or a meal, right? Like I don't have any interest in being like a meal of dark forces. And to be honest, I don't think I'm much of a meal. Like if you really want the light and the love, which everybody wants, you're probably better off going to the source, right? So I don't really know. Again, there's people who are better at talking about this than me. But I think there's a lot out there under, in God's creation. There's a lot of different things, and a lot of it's us, but a lot of it isn't. What are you going to do? It's like, do your best, be honest, right? My dad once told me, you can't cheat an honest man, right? It's like, if the devil wants to make a deal, but like you don't, like you can't, like you're not tempted, then okay, right? It's our own, I think, moral and spiritual weaknesses that let the dark forces in. And the more that we can, ask for help from the right places and, be positive and, build our energy system, the safer we are. But yeah, either way, whatever it is that shows up, be kind and try to help. It's my theory on stuff. And also, which is not to say sometimes you don't need to burn sage and ring a bell to clear the energies. Like sometimes you got to do that too, but the other stuff I think is primary.
The line between actual negative spirits and sort of negative emotions coming up is very thin. It reminds me of this other line, which is between when the person is spiritually gifted or just crazy. Is also very, very difficult sometimes to tell the difference. But we work with a shaman, so we have a shaman. He's an indigenous shaman from lineage. They know their stuff, so I can always consult him and be like, this person, do they actually have something, or is it something in them? And then he's like, well, they had a little bit of that, but we cleared it out, so now it's just whatever that's in their head. So then I can suggest them to the therapist. So it's good to have both worlds working in tandem. You mentioned shadow. Is this something you like to talk about or not really?
Yeah. I mean, that's people love the psychedelic world is shadow crazy. People love doing the shadow work, don't they? There was a great definition. I forget where I heard it. The definition of shadow are the parts of us that are still waiting to be loved, which I think is very sweet because a lot of times we want to demonize the shadow, right? It's bad. It can't be trusted. It's whatever. And it deserves to be pushed down and cast out, right? Cast out of our hearts. Instead of recognizing that it's our job to love all parts of ourselves, right? And that of course it's cranky, right? It's been cut off. It's been cut off from the light, right? And that's on us, right? It's not, can't blame. Yeah. How old are your kids?
4, 2.5, and 6 months.
Yeah. You can't blame a 2-year-old for being a 2-year-old. Why are you doing 2-year-old stuff? It's my job to love them anyway. Right. But we do that to ourselves all the time, right? We kick and numerous amounts of our inner children, we kick them out of our hearts because they acted the way they were supposed to act, right? And then wonder why our life isn't working out.
You talk a lot about mindfulness as well. Mindfulness and integration. What is the role of mindfulness and integration?
You ever read The Four Agreements?
No, not yet. Should I?
It's great. Well, and the cool thing about the 4 agreements is you don't really even have to read the whole book. You can just read the 4 agreements and then, contemplate them. You're a smart spiritual man. And that's one of the cool things about these things is that, the first of the 4 agreements is be impeccable with your word. Right. And he talks about how like we are creating our reality with our words and our thoughts. And that this is a divinely gifted spiritual power is how we use our words. Like, are we blessing each other? Yeah, great. There you go. Yeah, like, are we blessing each other or are we cursing each other with our words? Right? And then are we blessing ourselves or cursing ourselves with our words? So a lot of folks are constantly just shredding themselves, right? So somebody told them something about themselves or something happened, and then they decided something bad. They kind of internalized the story. And so we have all of this mental chatter inside of ourselves that is just like, you're not good enough, you're unlovable, you always mess things up, you're terrible, all this kind of stuff. And it's just rattling around in there. And so mindfulness practice is, there's literal practice called mindfulness of the mind, mindfulness of the thoughts. And so we start to see those thoughts and then we can interrupt. We just, I'm not going to do that anymore. Stop. And you can investigate it. You go to therapy and stuff and talk about, why do I think that I'm bad? Oh, because this happened. But that and $1 will get you on the bus. It's like, your mind is happening. This is what people kind of distance themselves from. Your mind is happening in real time and you're able to interact with it in every moment. That's what I'm talking about. Like, integration happens in every moment. So if I can sit down, I'm like, I'm going to sit with my mind, and my mind's like, you can't do that. You're not good enough for that. You're not meant to do that. You're this and you're that and the other thing. And I could be like, oh, actually, no. Like, we're not doing that thought. Like, we know why we do it, but we're still knowing why doesn't stop it. Right. And so a mindfulness practice where I'm sitting there and I'm catching the criticism, and I'm being like, we're not doing that. And then maybe even with your intention in your prayer, you put more positive words into your mind until that's the habit, right? Mindfulness is like a practice that helps you install better mental habits, better self-talk habits, right? It's like people want to kill the ego, which first of all, you can't, right? It's like, you're not going to kill the ego with 6 ayahuasca sessions, and probably not even with 600. It doesn't work that way. The ego comes back. Why not just program the ego to love, humility, and gratitude? All right. It's mindfulness practice. Just program the default mode network to like peace. That's why I think mindfulness is good, because it can help you do that.
It's interesting that you kind of put in the same sentence default mode network and ego. I kind of think about it this way, but what is the difference, or is it the same thing? What do you think?
Well, the default mode network, you should talk to like, Manish Girn or something like that, one of these neuroscientists who really know what it means. I have a video of it somewhere in my archives of this conversation. But, it's the way that it's a neurological functioning of some kind, right? The ego, I like a Ramana Maharshi style definition, which is, I'm out of water. The false sense of being a separate, long-lasting entity. Right? So false sense. So it's erroneous. It's not correct. But it's a false sense that there is this entity, right, that is persistent and long-lasting and separate from the totality of reality. Right? So that's the ego. So you think you're You think you're special. I think I'm special. You think you're Sam. I think I'm Dan. And, on one level, that's kind of true, but there's a lot of other stuff going on beyond just, and then I seem to be the same thing day by day by day, even though I'm consistently changing, right? And so that's the ego. And people show up to me all the time. I'm sure they come to you too. And they're like, oh, I got to kill this ego. Got to kill it. It's like, nuts. Because only the ego would want to kill the ego. Right? Pure undifferentiated consciousness is blissful and has no desire for death of any kind. It doesn't care. It's not suffering. Right? Pure undifferentiated consciousness is not suffering. The ego is suffering because it's self-centered and it's not getting what it wants. Right? And it won't let go of all the stuff that it wants. So, what we...
Suicide, ego trying to kill itself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's trying to kill itself because it, and it thinks what it's saying is basic, that there's a sense that people have a sense that they're making themselves miserable. And they want it to end in some ways, and that's cool. But it's not feasible. It just doesn't seem to be feasible. At best, people have to get some relief. Right? It's like we just kind of want to not take it so seriously. It's like, yeah, I want some water right now, and the body is unhappy, but I'm not the body. Right? I'm not going to suffer that much. Maybe I'll even shoot a text down. Can you send kid up with some water? Right? We'll send it in. If it happens, it's great. If it doesn't happen, that's great. So, we all have preferences, especially householders, right? I want this. I don't want that. I want this. I don't want that. To what degree are we going to suffer if we don't get it? And to what degree are we willing to sacrifice our well-being and the well-being of others in order to get it? Or how willing are we to compromise our values to get the stuff we want? Right? It's like that's where the rubber meets the road. Right? That's where the suffering begins. Because since we're not separate, we cause suffering to others. We get it. We're it's all connected.
That's very deep way of seeing thirst. But yeah, I'm sure you're getting thirsty, and I don't want to cause any more suffering. So let's.
I mean, it's just an example. It's just a handy example.
Yeah, we can start wrapping it up. Yeah, once again to avoid the suffering. So my back hurts a little bit. So.
Oh man, so sorry. Do we have it rough or what?
Yeah, what do you say?
Do we have it rough or what?
Not sure what that means.
When you have it rough, right? That's just like us saying we've got it bad. We're really in bad shape, the two of us. We're two peas in a pod, a hurt back and a thirsty mouth.
Fathership does that to you. Householding, as you say, householders. So before we wrap up, can you talk to us about the Mount Psychedelic Training Coaching Center, Psychedelic Integration Coaching Center?
Oh, yeah. So we have a year-long program. We train people to be coaches. And it is highly practical. I like to think this is one of the things that sets us apart from some of the other programs that are all great as well. But, I sort of have this yoga teacher background, and I used to teach yoga teacher trainings, and philosophy is nice and everything, but we really want to. Oh, hold on real quick. We got a visitor. Hello?
Yeah.
Bring him in. There's another dad here. Can you bring me a little water? Yeah, there was no water, babe. So we want to teach people to really how do you work with people? What is it like to be in the trenches? Because, it's like it doesn't help my students really if I say, hey, write a paper on whether or not psilocybin is good for major depressive disorder, right? But we kind of know that it usually is. I want to help folks ask good questions and have the tools and the skills to design good field work. So, it's about 200 hours, the program. We meet a couple of times a year. Thank you. And I appreciate it. And you got to drink the whole thing now. You good?
Yeah.
Can I have some?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. How old are you?
2.
He's 2. You 2, right? Can you do this? Hello. Hello. Right, and so that's the program. I mean, I'm doing a great job of selling it, I'm sure, but I kind of look at it almost like a yoga teacher training in a lot of ways, or a technical college, right? Like if you're going to train somebody to, fix your plumbing, you want to know that they can fix your plumbing. You don't care about like philosophy of plumbing, right? That's like this.
If they know Bernoulli's principle, the flow, laminar flow, etc.
Right. So you need to know the ones that actually allow you to do the work that you're going to do. And so that's what we're focusing on. Like, we focus on like skill building in a lot of ways. And, we're coming up on our 4th cohort in the fall. And, it's shaping up. It's probably going to be pretty great. And that's what we do.
That's really great. And I hope some of the listeners will be interested. So, I approve of your practical approach. We do something very similar. Ayahuasca is very diverse, and there's so many things you can do with it. So we just focus on healing. Just do this one thing, do it well, and then you can do other things later. So, where can people find more about you and more about your coaching program?
tamintegration.com. Like we come up. The Instagram, you found me on Instagram, I think. That we've got a pretty decent following there. And, we have all the social properties. I'm sure you'll put the notes. Oh, there he goes. It's off.
Instagram at Tam Integration.
Yeah, there's a website too, Tam Integration. And we do have ayahuasqueros, on staff. My assistant, has been assisting in ceremonies for decades, 30 years or so, down in the jungle and things like that. So we're tuned in to, even though, I've only had minimal ayahuasca experience, we've got some good big initiates there in the program, supporting folks who that's their medicine. And of course, one of the things we like to say, one thing, because sometimes people are like, oh, what do you do? Like, how do you integrate this versus how do you integrate that? It's like, well, you integrate people, right? It's not necessarily about a molecule. You just support the person where they're at. So there you go. Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
There are a lot of similarities, but integration people need psychedelic people so that they have something to integrate, and psychedelic people need integration people so that we can get support, and we both need to learn from each other so that we can, make it work, make people better and feel better and be happier. So Daniel, thank you so much. It was a really interesting episode. It was a little different than others. We did our tincture thing and stuff like that. So I enjoyed it, and I definitely am no longer stressed. So yeah, need psychotherapy.
Good. Go take a nap with your baby or something.
No, right now a group of 26 people is gonna arrive, and I'll have to sit in front of them and talk for a few hours. So it's good for me not to be stressed.
Awesome. Well, tell them I said hi.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. It was really fun to talk to you.
Thank you, Daniel.
All right, be well.
Guys, you were listening to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, we are the host, Sam Believ, and I will see you in the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to support us and psychedelic renaissance at large, please follow us and leave us a like wherever it is you're listening. Share this episode with someone who will benefit from this information. Nothing in this podcast is intended as medical advice, and it is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This episode is sponsored by Lawira Ayahuasca Retreat. At Lawira, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. Lawira, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you.